The world had watched billionaires do remarkable things, build skyscrapers that touched clouds, buy islands no one could pronounce, and chase the moon for profit. But no amount of wealth, no power, and no fame could mend the soundless world of little Clara Whitmore, the only daughter of business magnate Adrian Whitmore, a man whose name was synonymous with fortune. Born into a life where gold was ordinary and silence was her constant companion, Clara hadn't spoken a single word since the day she came into this world. Her laughter never echoed in the marble halls of the Whitmore mansion. Her father had all the world could offer, except the one thing his daughter's heart could not give, her voice. If you believe that kindness and second chances still matter in this world, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because what you're about to hear isn't a story about money, but about a miracle that only compassion could buy. For 7 years, Adrian turned his pain into obsession. He built a private wing in the city's largest hospital. 100 of the finest doctors, neurologists, psychologists, and speech therapists from every corner of the world were flown in. They studied Clara's silence through machines, tests, and theories that filled shelves thicker than any library. Each one left with sympathy in their eyes and defeat in their hearts. There's nothing wrong with her vocal cords, they said. It's psychological. Maybe she chooses not to speak. Those words cut deeper than any diagnosis. Because how could a father accept that his child chose silence when she was only a baby? Adrian's mansion became a temple of sorrow. Every corner echoed with Clara's quiet presence, her small hands tracing the walls, her drawings of colorful butterflies stuck to windows, her smile that never reached her voice. Every morning he'd sit by her bed, holding a book, reading stories aloud to a daughter who never replied. Once upon a time, he'd whisper, there was a princess who couldn't speak. And every night, he'd leave her room feeling smaller than the man the world thought he was. One cold morning, as the hospital prepared for yet another round of experimental therapy, the unthinkable happened. The hospital janitor had resigned unexpectedly, leaving behind a mess in the West Wing. The management, desperate for help, hired a replacement from the city's maintenance services, a quiet man named Eli Navarro, who wore a faded orange uniform and carried an old mop that had seen better days. He was assigned to the pediatric section, scrubbing floors, changing bins, and humming softly as he worked. He had no medical degrees, no titles, and no prestige. Yet there was something about him, a calmness that wrapped the air around him in gentleness. Eli noticed Clara the first day he entered her room. She sat by the window, her small figure glowing in the morning light, her sketchbook open, her eyes wandering through the clouds. He paused, quietly took off his cap, and smiled. She didn't look at him, but something in her posture shifted, as if she sensed a presence that wasn't there to diagnose her, but simply see her. He resumed his work silently, humming an old tune that had no name but carried warmth. When he left, he found a small drawing on his mop cart, a picture of a man holding a broom beside a smiling sun. Days turned into weeks, and Eli became part of the background. But Clara began to notice him, the way he always looked at things others ignored. A drooping plant, a flickering light, a fallen crayon, he fixed everything with quiet care. He never spoke much, but he listened deeply. And for a child who lived in a world where everyone spoke at her instead of to her, that was enough. One morning, Adrian entered Clara's room to find her smiling wider than he'd seen in years. Eli was crouched beside her bed, arranging colorful soap bubbles in a bucket. He gently dipped the mop handle, lifted it, and blew through the hole he'd carved in its stick, and suddenly, the room filled with shimmering bubbles dancing in the sunlight. Clara giggled, a soundless giggle, but her joy lit up the room. Adrian stood frozen at the door, torn between confusion and awe. From that day, Eli would visit Clara's room after finishing his shift. He'd draw with her, build small origami animals from the paper wrappers of cleaning supplies, and tell stories with gestures and expressions instead of words. He never asked why she couldn't speak. He never treated her as broken. He treated her as whole, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, Clara was drawing a picture of a bird in a cage. Eli watched quietly. When she finished, he picked up a small feather he had found earlier in the garden, placed it in her hand, and gently opened the paper cage she'd drawn. Then he whispered the first words she'd ever seen from him, written in shaky letters on the drawing, "It's okay to fly." Something shifted inside her. The next morning, Adrian received a call from the hospital nurse. Clara had been found awake before dawn, staring at the window, whispering something faintly. he ran faster than he ever had in his life. When he reached her room, he saw Eli sitting beside her bed, his eyes wide with tears, as Clara repeated the same word again and again, her voice trembling but real. Fly, fly. Adrian collapsed beside her, sobbing like a man who had just been reborn. For years, he had believed only science could save her. But it wasn't science, it was love, patience, and the unspoken power of being seen. Clara began therapy again, this time not surrounded by doctors in white coats, but by a man in an orange uniform who believed she already had everything she needed inside her. Months later, she was speaking in full sentences, her laughter echoing through hospital halls that had long forgotten joy. The doctors who once shook their heads in defeat now applauded in disbelief. Adrian personally invited Eli to his mansion, offering him anything, money, a house, a lifetime of comfort. But Eli simply smiled and said, "Sir, I'm just glad she found her voice. That's worth more than I'll ever earn." Adrian, for the first time, realized the depth of true wealth. It wasn't in numbers or net worth, it was in the quiet miracles born from kindness. He established a foundation in Eli's name, funding programs for children with speech and emotional disorders, all built on one philosophy: sometimes healing begins not in medicine, but in connection. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because every act of kindness, no matter how small, can change a life forever. Before we end, I'd love to know what you think. Comment below, what do you believe gave Clara her voice back, love, patience, or something divine? And as the sun set over the Whitmore estate that evening, Clara ran across the garden, her laughter ringing clear and pure for the first time. Eli watched from the distance, smiling softly, as the girl who once lived in silence finally took flight, her voice rising like a song the world would never forget.